Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by a stunningly good euphonium player. He can play slow and pretty, and he can play really fast. His name is LaDuke. Lance, how are you?
I'm feeling very slow and very pretty.
Well, fair enough. So this conversation that we had with a certain Geoffrey Pilkington from the National Opera here in Washington, D.C. was incredible.
Very cool. To go, we got a super deep dive on the horn call, which was the Siegfried horn call, which was fascinating. We haven't really gone deep on a specific piece of lit like this before, so I thought it was really, really interesting.
Yeah, he like really puts us. You'll hear it, but he really puts you there. I mean, in terms of where he had to try like a bunch of different things in terms of where he was located. In the pit, off the stage, on the stage. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many layers to it. I was really riveted by it, and then I looked up and was like, holy crap, we're 40 minutes into the episode. It was, there's a lot that goes into, and oh, by the way, it's like arguably the most demanding thing that any instrument ever has to play in an orchestral setting. And he had to do it in one rehearsal 7 times. That's 21 minutes of long call. That's insane.
I was just pulling up Siegfried to make sure I had it spelled right, and Siegfried and Roy came up. Now, if he had to do it backstage with a lion or a tiger sitting there, that'd be pretty good.
That would be pretty good. So yeah, I always figured that if Jeff didn't make it as a horn player, that he was going to join the circus. So
he looks good in lame.
Yeah. Oh, good Lord. Let's get this thing back on the rails here. So we wanted to take a second to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for, I almost said TEM. Autopilot is a dangerous thing, kids. Stay in school, don't do drugs. All right, so Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba. Whoop. Including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke Model euphonium mouthpiece.
Oh yeah!
You can find out more at Parker Mouth. That was really disturbing. At parkermouthpieces.com, or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right, Pappert people. Time.
All right, Pappert people. Thank you very much for being supporters of the show. That being the Mary Pappert School of Music at Duquesne University in beautiful and sunny Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Thanks to the efforts of Jim Twinkle Toes Nova. I don't know where that came from, but anyway, thanks to Jim Twinkle Toes Nova. You can find out more about
JTN, as we call him.
That's right. You can find out all about the going on at the Pappert School, specifically the brass area, by clicking on the link in the show notes. Thanks to Twinkle Toes and to the Pappert folks. Gonna get a text about that one.
Yeah, I think that that might be a group text. So. I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who has become a Patreon patron. We are cruising our way towards $100
awesome.
per episode. We're almost at 90 right now. You can support the show for as little as $1 an episode, which is a whopping $26 for the entire year. And we are, when we hit 100, we are actually going to be recording a very brief trumpet album that will be performed by Lance and myself. And Lance, I need to tell you something that I actually started practicing. For Valentine's Day, my wife was heading out of town to guest conduct immediately after school, because she's always guest conducting now because she's a badass. And so Nicholas and I went to her school to surprise her with flowers, and he's always very shy in front of the band. Well, this time I opened the door, and he ran with a dozen roses while the band was playing up to the podium, and the band stopped and exploded in a bunch of and anyway, he wanted to. It was, you couldn't script it any better than that. So then we are he wanted to play the trumpet, which was near her podium, again, because my wife's a badass. She always has a flute, a clarinet, and a trumpet that she plays all three of them infuriatingly well. And so he picked up the trumpet, and then he decided he wanted to play trumpet in the band. So then I'm sitting in the band with him, and we're playing, and he's trying to push down the buttons, as he calls them, while I'm playing. So I played the trumpet for about a minute and a half, and my mouth hurt so badly. It was... we're gonna have to clear the schedule for a month before we record this thing.
Perfect.
It's gonna be bad. So if you go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies, so there's a link in the show notes as always. It absolutely makes our day when we get another email notification from Patreon saying that someone has signed up. And we also have already recorded a bunch of bonus content, which we're a little bit late on this, but it is literally incoming now as we speak. Anyone over the $3 per month level $3 per episode level will be getting a whole bunch of bonus content from myself and Lance and some guests. And also, there's a bonus episode which is available to anybody at any level, even just $1 per episode, which every guest stays on the line for another like 10, 15 minutes afterwards. And this one with Jeff, you're going to hear he talks a lot about meditation and specifically how he uses it, and he goes real deep into that in the bonus episode, which is available to all of our Patreon patrons. So, and then the last part of that plug is that if you become a Patreon patron, then you have access to all of the previous bonus episodes. It's all there for you, so it's not like you only have access moving forward. So. And then last but not least is for those of you who have gone to iTunes to leave us a rating and a review, thank you so much. That is the fastest way that you can really help the podcast out. I really like our most recent review was by Ninja Needle. I like that's a good name.
It is good.
Terrific podcast, 5 stars, and then I enjoy the great advice and insight, not only from the artists that are questioned, interviewed, but from both Andrew and Lance. Great listen, inspiration, and insight for any musician at any level. So we are pushing for 100 ratings, and we've got 83. So we're like getting really close. So thank you for helping us push this over the finish line. And is there anything else that I'm forgetting?
Tell a friend.
Tell a friend. Yeah, tell a friend. Tell a friend. I always propose that if you know someone is going to really hate it, tell them too, because that's funny. So
that's good.
Yeah. Hey, a download's a download, people. You know what I'm saying?
Tell somebody.
So, just tell somebody. Tell your dentist. Yeah, I don't care if they'll enjoy it or not. Just tell them. So.
Okay, spit.
Yeah. All right, I think that is going to do it. So without further ado, let us get to our conversation with the National Opera's principal horn, Geoffrey Pilkington. And today we are joined by a very dear friend of mine who happens to be one of the best horn players in the world, and his name is Geoff Pilkington. Jeff, how are you this morning?
Hello, I'm very good. Nice to join you guys. Thanks for
joining us.
So tell the people out there, the couple of people that don't know who you are, because I bet most do, what do you do?
Well, I am currently the principal horn player for the Washington National Opera at the Kennedy Center in D.C.
Well, there you go. I guess that's a good gig if you can get it.
It's a pretty good job. I'm very happy to be a member there. I'm also a member with the Harrisburg Symphony in Pennsylvania, where I am the associate principal and third horn.
You're a busy dude. It's not like, well, the good thing is you're not married and don't have any kids.
Right, yeah.
Well, except for the wife and the 2 kids. So
other than those, yeah.
How old are Jeff's wife, like mine, is incredibly patient. So yes, she's a very patient woman. How old are your kids?
So we have a 1-year-old. Colin just turned 1 a month ago, actually, and we also have a 4.5-year-old boy, Gavin. So we have 2 boys. They have a lot of energy. And it's a lot of fun. Life is very full.
That's a good way to put that, Lance. I don't think I've heard it put that way before.
No, that's true. So how has your? I remember I'm old fart now. My kids are old, but how has your practicing changed? Like, what are you doing differently than you did when you were? Yeah, exactly.
Wow. I remember practice. I remember that I loved to practice. Actually, I used to devote quite a lot of my time to practicing. I was formerly the fourth horn, actually, in the opera company. I joined in 2004. I won the job while I was still in college, and I joined right after graduating from undergraduate. And at that time, life was a lot more simple, and I had all the time in the world. And I actually enjoyed practicing, and oftentimes would maybe even practice after an opera till very late in the early hours of the morning.
What the hell's wrong with you?
Well, I would find that like it didn't, as fourth horn, I wanted to save my chops for the show or whatever, but then after the show, I would just kind of like go at it, and I figured I could recover from whatever practice I was going to put in and be fine for the next day.
I thought you were about to say that as fourth horn that you thought you were going to save your chops for your practice session afterwards. I thought that's where you were going, but
well, it's kind of built into the job. I mean,
right.
It's fourth horn is like the gravy train. I mean, ironically, I felt like I won, almost exactly 10 years later, I won the principal job, and I was like, this is awesome. And then later I was like, shit, I'm going to spend the rest of my career trying to get back to my former job. Retire on fourth horn. No, I mean, I say that with, slightly insincere. My fourth horn job was fantastic, and there's like a lot of great roles that each individual member of the horn section has. But in terms of endurance and saving my face, it just didn't come into play as much when I was fourth horn. So I found that I could practice, at most times of the day, and it wasn't going to affect my job. That is something that's changed for me since I've been principal horn, that it's very important to me that I walk into work ready and with a good face. So I don't practice 3 hours before I go into work. I certainly don't stay up late practicing anymore. I'm too tired after the day, and I certainly have to get up much earlier in the day with 2 kids. So what has changed for me in terms of practice, as I was joking earlier, is that I feel like I used to practice, and lately it's been like you have to utilize whatever time that you have and use it more efficiently. I used to throw a lot of hours at it and have a lot of exploration in my practice, and now it is more focused what is it exactly I need to be preparing for, and I've got this amount of time. Can I do it in that amount of time? And you just get what you get. So actually, I remember when I was preparing for the first horn audition, it came up in 2013, and my son Gavin was born in September of 2013. And during that year, our section were sort of filling in and rotating through and playing guest principal after my predecessor had left, and we all sort of like filled in until the audition was happening. And so by the time I played my audition, Gavin was about 6 months old, and I had never prepared for an audition before while having a child. So the idea of just throwing all the hours that I could at it that wasn't going to work. I didn't have that ability, and all of a sudden I found myself doing a different job at work for the first time after 9 years, and I had to sort of figure out a new approach. And I found that I had to do, I think it was about 8 a.m. every day was my first session, and usually it was trying to restore my face after a long evening at the opera the prior day and kind of get things in working order. Then I would take a break and have a session on the excerpts and try to leave the bulk of the day free so that I could then go to work in the evening. Now, all of this practice time, though, was with a 6-month-old running around me, and trying to balance like playing with him and then playing the horn. I found that I couldn't sit to play because he was way too fascinated with the instrument. So he'd just walk over and like grab the horn and literally pull it away from my face while I was practicing. I mean, just all kind of things that I never considered, like how to deal with, So I just it's funny because I don't feel like I get that, what I used to consider a practice session, as like it's become something completely different at this point, mostly because of having 2 kids, I would say, but also because I have to ration my chops for the day for playing principal. as opposed to fourth horn.
Mm-hmm. Boy, you and I used to hang out over at Tom Couples' house for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours at a time, regularly.
Right.
That feels like it was about 5 lifetimes ago.
That was a long time ago. Good times.
Now you're talking about waking up at 8 a.m. to restore your face, to then
Waking up at 8?
change
No,
diapers.
I had already been up for an hour at least. Yeah, right.
Yeah, goodness gracious. So that's really fascinating to me that you were not only dealing with the new kid, but then even just on the work side of it, that you were rotating. How much principal did you play in the lead up to the principal audition?
That year, we basically split it between 3 of us, between the assistant principal, the third horn, and myself. So it just depended. If it was a ballet week, everything's conclusive into 1 week period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's an opera, including pre-production, it could be up to 6 weeks. So that year was sort of off and on, but I remember I was playing lead right before that audition. Now, actually, what I haven't said yet is that audition, there was a no hire. So that's not the end of the audition story.
Those are always fun.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
So we hold auditions that are completely blind. They have a screen up all the way till the end. So my colleagues did not know when I was playing, and the music director did not know I was playing, although they knew I was taking part in the audition.
They just knew you weren't good enough.
Not good enough. Next. So in the first audition, we ended up having a super final round. It came down to 2 people. It was myself and Phil Munns, who's the principal horn in Baltimore Symphony and a phenomenal player and great person. So I had recently, around that time actually, had been working with him a little more, so I had gotten to know him. And I remember very clearly, we were both sitting in the room after we had played the super final, and at that point we felt pretty confident we could put our horns away. They already had us play a whole bunch, and I think we had to we always end up finishing the audition with the long call after doing all your solos and excerpts, and then we did that again in the super final. So we're like, okay, I think we're done. And we're sitting in the room, and I remember telling Phil, I was like, well, I'm really happy. He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, either I'm getting a job or you're getting a job, and I'm perfectly happy with either scenario, because I would love working with you, and I'd be happy to have the job. So I was just I was totally happy. And then what I didn't consider was the guy coming in the room and saying, yeah, we didn't, neither of you. And what I had heard later from the maestro was that we had not yet heard. By the way, both of us had received a confirmation vote from the committee. So we were both confirmed by our committee to the maestro, at which point he has the final say who to hire or who not to hire. And he had the choice of either of us, since we each had a confirmation vote, and he chose neither of us. And he told the committee that they had not yet heard the next Dale Clevenger, and that's why we weren't hiring.
Huh.
So that was great. And after that audition, since I'd done well in it, I ended up playing acting principal for the following season. So I did all of the principal work following that season.
Right. I forgot
So
that.
I didn't have a 6-month-old at that time. He was getting a little older. So in some ways a little easier, in some ways more challenging. And for me, remember at this point I had played fourth horn for 9 years, and while I had originally always thought maybe I would be principal horn, I felt very comfortable with the idea of playing principal. The first job I won was fourth horn, so I didn't have a lot of time to get my feet wet and get comfortable in that job. So I was both cutting my teeth on the job while doing acting principal, but also trying to prepare for the audition that was going to be planned for the next year, almost exactly a year after the previous audition. So I found myself now really juggling the idea of playing principal and preparing for this job, and I just made that my full-time job, was to do both, and whatever came of it was going to be. And so fast forward 1 year, we had the next audition, and it was a similar situation in that we had a final round, I think, of 4, and then a super final round with 2 people. The other person was Wei Ping Chow, who's a longtime friend of mine that we were actually in school together at some point in New York. And we both played our final round, and then we got word from the maestro. This was even better than the Clevenger comment. It said, and this was delivered, of course, by the personnel manager. He said, "Oh, well, the maestro would like you both to know that really, really enjoys, your sound, intonation, technique, musicality, all these things are great, yeah, yada yada. But really, what I'm interested in the super final round is just don't miss any notes. That's all I care about.
Is this a parody?
Yeah. and so
What the hell is wrong with conductors?
now my colleague doesn't know this conductor at all,
Right.
and I think it was kind of easier to shed that comment and laugh it off. I happen to know this person very well and know all the intent behind it, and it was a difficult thing to hear. And part of me was just like, oh my gosh, of course, really, it's all going to come down to that. Don't miss a note, and of course, you're playing a notoriously treacherous instrument. It's it's so easy to go from all right, I got this, everything's going well, you sound really good, and all of a sudden, nope, sound like a goat, sound like a dying goat, just instantaneously, just barely, something's a little off in the chops, and it's catastrophic, it can be anyway, so it's you always sort of operating the instrument like this trapeze artist or high wire walking. It's that it's the possibilities there, and now this person's put it in your mind. And I had worked with Don Green when I was in college, who is a famous sports psychologist.
He's great.
And all that stuff was enormously helpful to me. And I remember he would always say never say don't miss a note, or don't get nervous, or don't whatever, because your brain doesn't hear the don't, so your brain just hears nervous, miss notes.
Yes.
And so of course that's all I'm hearing from this guy, and I go back to the room to get ready to go back on stage, and it's a very demanding list. We're about to play some very technical stuff. And I just remember sitting down and thinking to myself, I can't believe it's coming down to this. Just don't miss a note. And and I thought to myself, I could go out there and make that my priority. Really just try not to miss a note. I've never conceived of that before, or something oh yeah, sure, just don't miss a note. And I thought, I could do that. And then, but I cannot guarantee that I won't miss a note just because I'm thinking about that. So I was this is ridiculous. This is not at all what I had set out to do when I prepared my whole preparation. I had a goal and a way that I wanted to play and something I wanted to say with each piece of music. And I was I'm going to forget he said that at all. And I'm going to swing for the fences, and I'm going to play it exactly, I'm going to just try to go for it, and hopefully in the process, move them. And, it'd be great if I didn't miss a note. But I couldn't make that my priority. But I just remember so profoundly that moment of okay, he really threw that out there. Okay, we're doing this now.
Wow.
Gosh.
That's unbelievable. I ask what's wrong with conductors, and it sounds like a rhetorical question, but I'm actually asking what's wrong with conductors. It's the same thing in the military band world, at least with a lot of them. So, Lance got along with all of his conductors.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, yeah. It ends up becoming a
them.
thing at some point, I guess. But
wow. Yeah, that's unbelievable. Yeah, the human brain does not respond well to the word "don't."
It doesn't even process it. The funny thing is,
don't punch the maestro in the face. Don't punch the maestro in the face.
I don't come from a family of professional musicians. Both of my parents are very interested in music, and they sing in their church choir. My mother played violin when she was young, and actually my father played French horn, which is indirectly why I play French horn. I did not know anything about instruments, and when I was in grade school, in 5th grade, you could join the band, and in 6th grade you could join intramural sports. So actually, this was the first thing you could participate in the school. And I already knew music because I'd been playing piano, and I was in and sang choirs and stuff. And I remember going to the band room, and they just had all the band instruments laid out, and my father said, well, go ahead, you can pick whatever you'd like, so long as it's not the saxophone or the French horn. And I said, why? And he said, because I hate the saxophone, and I played French horn in high school, and he had to do a bunch of Sousa marches, marching with the concert horn. He's all we ever get is the offbeats. Yeah, and the trumpets always get the melody, so it's just really, it's really frustrating. And so I was like, "Oh, yeah, you don't want me to play that? Sure, sure.
I'm gonna
Okay,
play
yeah,
the long
I'm going to
call."
play the French horn." But aside from that knowledge base, like it's funny because I always at some point end up in a conversation with someone, either a family who doesn't know much about music, or someone that you might meet and has questions about what it is I do, and invariably, like, some people like have heard, "Oh, I hear the French horn's a very difficult instrument. Why can you explain why that is?" And I have an answer that makes sense, and especially if you know anything about a brass instrument, I can kind of describe why that might be. But I ended up finding a different way to explain it, in that you can take a piano, any piano in the world, and you can take a 5-year-old, any 5-year-old in the world, and you can march him up to that piano and point to a middle C, and you say, "You see this right here? You see this key? I'd like you to press that key for me. Could you do that?" "Sure." And they walk up to it, and I guarantee you, every single time, a middle C comes out with a perfect articulation, a great sound, and it happened the moment they press that key.
You need therapy, Jeff.
And that's the starting point for playing this instrument. Whereas horn is like, you've made it, right? Like, you can win a job. You've gone through school. You've done the 10,000 hours or whatever, and you get your job, and you cannot just guarantee that note's going to come out.
It's the same analogy with a horn player, but it's like you're wearing a boxing glove when you're trying to push down the C, so you get a bunch of other notes as well.
Andrew, doesn't it sound like he's about 45 minutes from completely losing it?
Yes, it does. It's like that would be a way for our show to get a lot of downloads. If like Pilkington never picked up a horn ever again after his interview on the Brass Junkies.
He went into work, punched the maestro in the face.
At first, I chose no one's face to punch, but actually, I've chosen yours.
Well, I think all that's to say that, like, you have to approach this instrument and this job with a lot of humility and a lot of resilience to constantly pick yourself up. At any point something doesn't go the way you want, you cannot let it whatsoever detract you from the goal at hand, because it will invariably happen.
Right. What can you describe the other the slightly more technical way that you explain why a horn is difficult?
So every instrument has a harmonic series. Actually, every length of tube has a harmonic series, and we all operate on this with our brass instruments, and we have to buzz into the mouthpiece, and it's amplified through our instrument, and we get in the area of where these nodes will vibrate along the instrument. And basically, the French horn plays farther up on the harmonic series than most instruments. The harmonic series always starts with wider intervals, and it gets quite a lot closer together. So we have 3 sets of valves on each side of the instrument, and you can get a bunch of notes on each side, and they all get very close to each other as you go farther up the instrument. So at some point when you're playing, especially in the upper register, you're very close to a different note, whereas maybe on the trombone you could be a third or a fourth away from the next note. So in terms of like the note that you're going to be buzzing into your instrument, that cannot vary very much on a French horn. Like, you have to be really quite on it to get that note to happen when you want. And that's a big part of it right there. It's further complicated by the fact the bell is pointing backwards and you stuff your hand in the bell. Which actually does help with intonation to correct some of the deficiencies with the intonation. But
that's what the maestro heard the first time, was some of your deficiencies.
No.
There's a certain amount of masochism that goes with being a French horn player.
You're right.
Perhaps.
As I say to people, it's an instrument that's literally designed to miss notes.
But Dad never explained that to me when I was in 5th grade. So it's all his fault.
All you heard was, see, isn't it funny how, as you said earlier, that the brain does not even register don't unless you're a child and it's your parent saying don't, and then it's like, exactly, and then you obviously only hear what comes after it, but you hear, you should definitely do this.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's funny too is that the way he had explained it was that the instrument was poorly written for, essentially. Now, if all you do are Susan marches, I can understand that frustration. But in reality, the horn has a really great literature, and the way that it's written for throughout opera, ballet, symphonic repertoire, solo repertoire, chamber music, it's very rich and varied, and it's actually quite a lot of fun playing the horn. It turns out.
I would imagine it. I would imagine it's really fun to play the horn like you do. I saw. I guess it was a little over a year ago that you guys did the ring cycle. Is that right?
Almost 2 years ago. It was
Oh,
2016.
it was 2 years ago. Man,
Yeah.
time flies.
Yeah.
I saw the dress rehearsal for Siegfried, and
You did.
You just sounded just ridiculously great.
Oh, thanks so much.
Like from the beginning to all the way through the full 9-hour opera, it was just like everything was just automatic. And how well, that's obviously for anyone who's not familiar with the horn orchestral or opera canon. Is that basically as famous as parts get?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the Ring, first of all, is comprised of like 24 hours of music, and this is by far the most extensive and difficult solo for any instrument. It happens completely alone without any orchestral accompaniment.
Right.
It's almost 3 minutes long, and it happens in the middle of a 5-hour opera.
Right.
And there's nothing like it.
In fact, if anyone
else.
doesn't know it, you need to go right now. Just hit pause and go and like Google, Siegfried long call and listen to what he's talking about. And it's unbelievable. Yes, everyone stops and then everyone's like, "Okay, horn dude," or
Yeah.
dudette. Yeah,
And it's that's funny that you were there for that. That Siegfried was an incredible challenge for me, in particular the dress rehearsal, because I actually had to take sick leave from the Valkyria, which I believe was 2 nights prior, because I ended up with a terrible pinched nerve that was like giving me quite a lot of pain that was going from the top of my neck down through my shoulder at that time. And I was trying all the tricks, I saw all the people, massage therapist, chiropractor, acupuncture, cupping, the whatever they call it, all the different ways, essential oils. they gave me they were I got pain meds. They were like, yeah, just take a bunch of these, it'll make you loopy. But I was like, I can't do that. What are you talking about? Not and then play the horn successfully. And that particular night that you were there, they had already contacted the personnel manager at the Met. They were trying to get Eric Rawalski, the principal horn there, out of playing Bohème that night to come in and play for me in the pit. And then I think Abel Pereira was being contacted to play the long call that night. And I was prepared that all the advice was like, just stay home and get better, but I wasn't sure I was going to get better. And basically the way that we rehearsed the ring cycles was that since each act is so long, it's like each act is almost as long as a symphonic concert.
Right.
And we only have, in our contract, a 3.5-hour call until they start paying overtime. So there's no way that we ever in like a tech rehearsal could get through a Siegfried. So
Right.
for me, when we had done the tech rehearsals earlier, we would just do one act at a time. So there was one night where we just did the second act, and that's all I do in the second act is play this long call. And my assistant principal would move over and play principal in the pit for me while I was preparing to play this solo. So I had not had an opportunity to play to understand what it felt like to play the entire opera and in context play this long call in the middle of that. And had I just stayed home that evening, my first time doing that would have been in the first cycle. And I
Right.
just thought, I was like, whatever, I just need to do this. I'm going to be in a lot of pain, but I want to see what it's like. And, even if it doesn't go my best, I'm just going to do this. So that night was extraordinary for me, and that I was in so much pain, and particularly the higher I went, I would feel this sharp pain into my neck. And it ended up going very well, but it was like
Yeah, it did.
It was just, I remember it very clearly. It was a very difficult evening. And so anyway, I've known about this long call since I was in high school. Started preparing it. I ended up having to put it on different audition tapes for like Music Academy of the West, Summer Festival or something. Maybe it's on a mock audition while I was at Juilliard. And then it always feels one way because you're preparing it on its own, and and maybe oftentimes people like to put it at the end of a list, and that's how it was for me in both of my auditions here. In fact, I played it in both the final round and the super final round at the end of each segment. So I'm always a little bit used to playing it when I'm tired in it. By the way, it's definitely an endurance type of excerpt. But when you do it in context, it's so much different because it's in a 5-hour opera, first of all. So you've already been playing a lot. But then you go backstage and you have this, like, you have an intermission, and then I was waiting in a dressing room for a period of time after that until I get my call to go off stage. So then it's not exactly getting cold because you can play your horn a little bit, while the orchestra's starting the second act. But at some point, you have to go off stage, and then you really can't play because all the action's happening. So you have to kind of just pick up your horn at that moment, and it's like jumping onto a fast-moving train. You know what I mean? You're standing still, and you're just going to grab on and go. It's like, wee, here we go. Okay, I'm doing the long call. I'm totally alone doing this thing. And so it's a wild experience. But also, the other thing that I realized at some point is that all of my interpretations, I can't necessarily stick to them because we have Siegfried on stage, who is now just acting. He's miming the horn call.
Right.
Okay, so I have to line up everything I'm playing with his motions on the stage.
Wow.
Or the stage manager is going to get upset because you can't just have this guy like literally do the motion like he's playing an instrument, and 4 seconds later you actually hear the horn. It doesn't make sense.
That's the one I want to see.
Yeah. So I had to attend what they call a piano dress rehearsal, and that was the first time. That was actually the first time I played the long call. I don't think I'd played it. Maybe I played it once in front of my colleagues in rehearsal, but there wasn't much need to because there's not much to line up together with the orchestra, and they had a lot to work on anyway. So I showed up to the piano dress rehearsal, which was following a 3.5-hour rehearsal, orchestral rehearsal, and that's where we, for the first time, sorted out where I was going to do the call and how it was going to happen. And literally, we have the piano doing an orchestral reduction, and the singers are in full dress, and they're doing it like it's a performance. So I had been set up off stage, sort of below. I mean, the stage at this point is maybe like 6 feet off the ground, and I'm below on the ground level, and I have a monitor to watch the maestro, and I can just barely see Siegfried on the stage. So that's my first sort of experience with doing that. So I played it right through, and I was pretty happy because I felt like I did a great job. And by the way, I don't have tenure at this point in my job. This is, for me, is like the end of my probationary period.
That's
so I'm
right.
very, like, every day I come to work is like an audition. I don't think I even had it by the time you heard that dress rehearsal. I think I actually got tenure at the end of the dress rehearsal period, right before we began the cycles. Anyway.
That sounds about right.
So
holy moly.
So I did this first call, and the artistic director just like kind of throws a fit, and she's like, "No way, this isn't going to work. The horn sounds too distant, and it's not lining up." And I was like, "Okay, just stay calm. Gonna have to do this again.
Just don't miss any notes."
No, I'm not really thinking about that, to be honest. But I was like, I know they're gonna kind of like. They're going to change a lot of things, and I just have to be flexible here. So the number one thing is that it sounded too distant. And my bell was pointing off stage way off into where they store other sets, and there's a giant like warehouse looking off stage, and it's just open off the wing. So clearly that wasn't going to work out. So then they tried me with my bell facing toward the stage, but now I couldn't see the monitor with the conductor. So now I have to have another conductor in person who's watching the monitor that I will then follow, and I can no longer see Siegfried. So he's taking cues from the monitor and Siegfried on stage. And now they could hear me on stage, but it's just still, any bit of video lag, it wasn't working out. So they're like, it's still not working, So we had to keep coming up with different solutions, and eventually what they decided is that I should be on stage. Literally up on the stage, just like they have these like massive curtains that are hanging like maybe 5 in a row off of like the house left and right of the stage, so that when the singers, they can exit and enter and stand just off stage and then enter without being seen, but it's actually on the stage itself. So that's where I was sitting. I was just outside of, like, if I leaned forward 3 inches, I would have seen the audience. That's where I was on stage.
Wow.
And so now they could hear me, and now I could see Siegfried, no problem. With the exception that I have a whole lot of super bright stage lights, basically right in my eye because they were going directly across the stage. So that was interesting. But another thing that kind of threw me off was that the stage was canted down toward the orchestra, almost a 45-degree angle.
Right.
So I played this call kind of like trying to configure my body to make up for this, and my music was half falling off the stand, so someone was there holding it for me. And they eventually were like, okay, this is going to work, let's do that. So I asked the stagehands, could they rig something to cant my chair back and level it out. So we got everything leveled out, and we do it one more time. By the way, I played it 7 times in that piano dress rehearsal.
Good Lord.
And we finally got it to the point where everything was going to be what they wanted in terms of sound and lining it up. And I got one final complaint. It was, oh, your music stand is bleeding light onto the stage. It's not good. We're not going to do it. And they'd even put like little black like paper along the back, try to cover it up the best they could. And stage director, no, the artistic director came to me and they're like, all right, you've known this solo your whole life, like just do it without music. Like we don't want that light. We don't want the lights on the stage. Like what's wrong with you? It's on every audition you've ever taken. Just play it very unceremoniously, like just telling me what to do and not play it with music. And I was just like, okay, stay calm. What do you want to say about this? I was like, all right. Okay, I hear you on this. Maybe there's another solution. To be honest, I would be more comfortable playing it with music. You're right, I do have it memorized. But do you really want to find out what happens when the horn player has a memory slip in the middle of this opera and then there's no horn solo happening or it goes off into an ad lib? I was like, I don't want to find out what that sounds like. I just like, and you have this period of time where you're sitting on stage ahead of time, and I could follow the music. There's an English horn solo, and then, I could follow the first horn part in the pit. I was like, I'd just be more comfortable. I think let's go ahead and find something else out. And a friend of mine had a great idea and suggested that we get an iPad Pro so that we could get rid of the light. So they did that. They bought an iPad Pro and they put my long call music up on this iPad for me. And that's how I did the performance each time. The librarian would set it up. So it was very, very high-tech experience, actually.
Wow. All I can think of is that you should try playing in a professional brass quintet. It's a lot easier. Wow. I'm trying to process all that.
It was a rush. And what I was started to say earlier was that you have to take your cue from what they're doing. So actually, I would rehearse separately and talk through with the Siegfried person how it is that I envision this going. But then, and even the way he would cue, like he would kind of go up, down before he's holding like a mini horn, And I was like, we need to build in a fudge factor here because like I can't just hold my breath for 20 seconds and then go like on a dime the second you move that instrument. I was like, can you kind of like do it in a circle motion, and I'll kind of do it like at the top of that circle, wherever. And we had everything sort of choreographed. And there's this moments where there's like these repeated concert A's, and Siegfried has to run from one stage to another, and you're supposed to sound increasingly like more you're from the distance actually at this point. So I would wait for him to run to the other side stage, and each night, maybe he had a little more coffee that day and it was a little quicker. Maybe the next night he's a little tired because we just did Valkyrie. I don't know. So each night was like a little bit different, and you just had to be prepared to change things on the fly and go with it. But it was really an amazing experience. Right, yeah.
Put you in the outfit and let you run around.
The two of you were spitting images of each other, so nobody would have noticed the difference at all.
Oh, would that have been awesome? Oh man.
Man, I can't. What's really funny is that, ignorant me, I'm sitting there and I remembered, briefly thinking like, boy, that dude on stage is like doing a really good job of playing air horn. And I'm like, and I'm not thinking that you're like, you've got a conductor conducting a conductor off a monitor conducting another conductor, and there's like technology. Yeah, there was like a platform built for you, and you're on stage but hidden, and
it's wild. I mean, when you're backstage, there's so much going on. Like you have the stage manager with their headset, and they're in front of this massive board for all the lights, and they've got the microphone. They're cueing different people when they're supposed to come on stage and sing. They're doing lighting cues, or stage managers that are just walking around doing their job, and they don't care to be particularly quiet right before you play your solo. And then, I mean, one night, like the executive director was back there just to listen bell side to me playing, and just as like any number of people might be there for whatever reason. It's like, actually going back to Don Green, I was remembering my adversity training that we did. We used to do these mock auditions that my teacher would set up, and Don Green would be there, and she would invite him in, and at some point we would have to do what he called adversity training. So I remember I remember a colleague of mine while I was playing another extended horn solo, famous Tchaikovsky's Fifth. Everything was going fine, like a couple lines into the solo, and all of a sudden, and everyone was really, really quiet, and I started to wonder, I was like, what's this adversity training anyway? Like, what are they going to do? Like, someone's going to cough real loud, right? Or, like, drop their water bottle? Like, I was like, now I'm starting to think, like, what should I prepare myself for? And we had someone in the studio that actually did a lot of stand-up comedy, and he had a certain way about himself, and he did like what I think is called like the worm. Does that make sense?
Oh,
They
yeah.
call it the worm. And he jumps out of his chair and like shapes his body like a backward U, and just like flings his body over like a worm right at me, like in dramatic fashion, like 20 feet across, and he keeps coming toward me, and I'm still playing the solo, and then he just lays down at my foot, puts his head on my foot, and caresses my ankle while I'm still playing this solo, and I'm like, oh, adversity training.
So that's what I've been doing my whole career, is adversity training
Yeah,
for others.
I was
didn't
just
know there was a
about
name
to-
for it.
Studied comedy and has a certain way about him. I was like, yeah, was this Lance? You can just say it if it was, because that's that's the most polite way to sum up Lance's shortcomings. Shall we say?
I've just been doing adversity training. I didn't know. It's like I was doing this ninja mind thing. All of my colleagues forever.
Lance, am I alone, or were you also like getting more and more tense as he just told that story about the long call and the rehearsal, even knowing it went well? That's
No, I think it's better and better and better. It's like I just love that. Like, what's gonna go wrong? Because they just you've been in that situation where, well, something's gonna break at some point. Well, let's just keep putting the accelerator down and see what this button does. Right? So I kind of like that, actually.
Man, there you go. And so how many performances of each of the how many complete ring cycles did you do?
We did 4 complete cycles, including the dress cycle, because it's basically a performance. So
Right.
3 official cycles,
Okay.
and we did a 4th cycle preceding that as our dress cycle. So 4 in a row, which ended a 9-week period of time.
Wow.
See, you were complaining earlier about your 6-month-old yanking the horn away from your face. That's more adversity training, I think. Like, that's
Yeah,
nothing
absolutely.
compared to what you had to deal with.
So is that-
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it was such a. I remember the year leading up to the ring cycle, and thinking what can I do to prepare myself for this? And so, of course, I'm playing the horn a lot. I know that I need to be in phenomenal shape, but I also need to know that I need to have a lot of energy. I need to have a lot of rest. I need to be mentally tough. At this point, we had Gavin in a daycare, and you could sort of pick your drop-off time. So I would get up usually about 6:30 in the morning before rehearsal, get him up, feed him breakfast, drop him off at daycare, and then go to the gym and swim some laps to get like my breathing going every morning, so that like when I walked into work, I felt like completely open and ready, and like very awake as well. I didn't want to be just waking up and walking in with my coffee. I
Right.
wanted to be like ready, like it's a 7 p.m. show for every morning. And actually ended up doing the short call, which is in Gotterdammerung, which is an abbreviated version of this long call we've been talking about in Siegfried. I think we did that in the very first rehearsal. And we had been given no indication as to what we were going to rehearse in the first 2 weeks. It just said ring rehearsal. So
Wow.
you're responsible for preparing all of this music. And most of my books were about 75 pages long per opera. For a brass instrument, that's a lot of music.
That's like the 14-year career I had in Boston Brass, I think, was 75 pages. I think total.
Yeah, and so just needing to be prepared to like
Wow.
drop the needle at any point. And then of course I end up doing this short call. And actually he didn't say anything beforehand, so we're doing the Rhine journey, and I'm sitting in the section of 9, and I'm realizing, I'm like, well, this is where I would go off stage. And I just kind of like excused myself from the section and walked around to the back of the room on the other side of the orchestra. And I guess the maestro didn't even notice I had done that. So we get to the moment right when the short chord happened, and I just played it. So I was like, this is what happens next. And it like almost shocked him off the podium because he didn't, now there's a horn coming from the other side of the room. And I just played the whole short call straight through it. And he was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know. Sorry, I didn't give you any advance notice on this, but here you are and you did it. So thank you for that. And it was
And
like,
then you did the worm
day
back
one,
to your
boom,
chair.
short call. And, and we ended our first. I think the end of the first 2 weeks, we ended with 26 hours of rehearsals in 4 days' time.
Wow.
So it was it was quite intense. And I knew sort of what I was in for. Somehow, I mean, at some point I would have said it would have been, once in a lifetime opportunity to take part in a ring cycle. They just don't come up that frequently. In fact, the
Sure.
one that we did that you saw at the Washington National Opera was the first time that we've presented the ring cycle in the history of this company.
Right.
So it was a big deal for them to do. And in fact, they had intended to do it, I think about 4 or 5 years before that. So when I first joined the company, the plan was to do the ring cycles, but since we had never done them, we were going to do one opera per season from the ring and then do the cycles. Okay. So my first year here, we did Das Rheingold. And even though I won the fourth horn job, I ended up playing second on that, and played the eighth horn solo that begins Das Rheingold. And if you recall, there's a single horn solo that begins. It starts in the low register.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually in the eighth horn part. But I played a second horn. We did 7 performances of these operas at this time because we weren't doing it in the cycle. So we did 7 Das Rheingolds while I was earning my tenure on fourth horn. And as a side funny story is that it's my first job. I was fresh out of college, and I wasn't really sure how the tenure thing works, but I was just like, I'm not going to say too much. And after I think it was after the 6th Rheingold, I was talking to the principal afterwards, the principal horn. I was like, so is there going to be a meeting with the maestro? Because I knew he was leaving town after Rheingold. I was like, I think this is around the time that people had said generally tenure decisions made, And he's like, yeah, I don't know. Let's ask the maestro. And then the maestro walks up. And he was like, "Oh, Maestro, are we gonna have a meeting for Jeff and tenure?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" I was like,
Oh.
"Oh God, what?" And he's like, "Well, like according to the contract, we have to have a meeting with the person, and you can say how you think he's doing, and grant him tenure or not." And he looks at me and he goes, "He doesn't have tenure?" I was like, wait a second. This whole time I'm sweating all these solos, and you thought I already had tenure? Oh my gosh. so then he looks at me and goes, "Well, he has tenure." I was like, "That's
man.
it?" I was like, "That's binding. I have tenure." There we go. It was like one just like simple conversation.
Dear Facebook. Wow.
So I had the experience of playing second horn on Das Rheingold. The next year I played second horn on Die Walküre. And then I think we skipped a season, and then we played Siegfried. I played fourth horn on that. And then we did Götterdämmerung. I played fourth horn on that. It was actually the first time that we worked with Philippe Augan, who became our music director, who, as you know, conducted our ring cycles in 2016 as well. So I think this was maybe in 2009 or so. And then we were, meant to do this ring cycle, but the funding kind of crashed through, and it never actually happened. So it was kind of a big bummer for the company. So I now at least played all of the operas from the ring. And then in 2011, I had the opportunity to go play the ring cycles with the San Francisco Opera under Runnicles.
Nice.
And I went out and I played assistant principal. So I would play assistant on everything, but then principal on the second act of Siegfried while the actual principal was going back to prepare for his long call, as well as lead on the Rhine Journey and Götterdämmerung. So for me, it was a great experience. I got to play lead on some of the ring cycles then. And then shortly after that, I played offstage on Götterdämmerung at the Met while they were recording for their cycles, which was maybe only a year later in 2012. And then we did our ring cycles in 2016. And as it happens, about a week ago, I confirmed I'm going to play the ring cycle again this May in San Francisco.
No kidding. Yeah, man. You're a ring expert. You're like Doug Rosenthal on the bass trumpet there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So unbelievably, it just keeps coming up for me.
Wow. Well, that's what happens when it's just like Lance's experience in the military. Yeah, competence is punished.
That's right.
When it gets out that you can play the long call at a 45-degree angle, then they're like, well, hell, we could probably suspend him from the ceiling if that's what the orchestra director wants. Yeah, like
We'd like you to try it without a mouthpiece.
Wow, insane. That what a different world than what Lance and I have have grown up in. It's like, I can't wrap my brain around. And I've played a lot of orchestra shows that are demanding, but like just nothing nearly as long and as athletic as you're talking about. And I also just can't imagine the mental,
yes, absolutely,
the mental part of staying sharp for straight hours I mean, it doesn't really get any more exposed, and not just the long call where literally everyone stops playing and they don't literally turn around and look at you, but they're all listening.
No, you're right. It's the whole experience and making it through, knowing exactly how your part fits in at any point of 5 hours, and being able to adjust on the fly. It's very draining physically, emotionally, and mentally. And I found that I had to. I feel like focus is like a little bit of a muscle, and you can work on it and improve it. And so actually the first time when I did the cycles in San Francisco, I was trying to find like something to do, like to stretch me out a little bit. And so I was kind of looking at some yoga classes nearby, and the one that was closest to where I was staying was a Bikram class, which is hot yoga. And I was like, well, I've never done that before, but I guess I'll try it. And it's 90 minutes. So it's pretty long, and it's very slow moving. There are less poses for you to get into. It's physically demanding as well, but they call it like a moving meditation. And I realized at some point that for me this was really great and had a lot of parallels with what I was going to be doing in the opera pit. So I worked a lot on my focus like in these classes. And in addition to that, every single time before I went in to play the ring cycle, I would set aside some time to meditate and just clear my head, and I never walked into that pit with a scatterbrain or with other things on my mind. I always made sure before I even walked in the pit, I was ready to focus only on the task at hand and to lead our section of 9 horns through this journey. And that's really a big part of it. And it actually was a big part of my preparation for the second time we had the principal horn audition. I worked with my teacher, who was longtime principal horn at the Met, Julie Landsman. I think she was there from like 1985 to 2011 or 2010, perhaps. And of her many great qualities, one of the things that she's particularly good at is that mental side of things, and she knows how to prepare herself for that and how to help that in the moment for her to play the best. So we worked together a little bit on that because like I was saying earlier, with having less time to practice and having a demanding list to work on while playing principal, I found that I had less actual horn time. And so we talked a lot about visualization, and I would spend time just basically visualizing myself playing it the way I wanted to play it, listening to myself as if I were in the audience, playing it the way I'd like to play it, because as we were saying earlier, how the mind does not hear no or don't as an instruction. Also, the mind doesn't necessarily differentiate between an imagined experience always and a physical experience. So I can put myself in this position of playing through my audition on stage, and if I give myself enough detail in this imagery of it, my brain feels like I've actually experienced it, to the point where when I've done 100%. That, when I walk out on stage for that audition, I feel like I've already done this a bunch of times. Maybe I played 2 mock auditions. I didn't even have time for that. It was a very different preparation for me, and I know that this, for me, was the difference in me being able to play my very best on that day, and just being able to play good because I had prepared it,
Wow. It's funny that we interviewed Phil Munns, and he talked about meditation. We interviewed Jen Montone, and she talked about meditation. Now here you are talking about meditation. It's like, principal horn is treacherous. So I think if you've got a narrative going in your head, then that probably is not good. So
well, it's very easy to have self chatter, like while
Right.
you're doing a task, and a lot of
Sure.
times it can be negative. It can be like, oh, how's this going to go? Sometimes I don't always get this part, or
Right.
I'm feeling nervous. How's this going to go, etc. I really want to play well today. None
Right.
of those things are helpful, obviously.
Right.
So the more that you can fill your mind with anything positive or a plan, any kind of game plan. I mean, it was so for me. It was the first time I was this detailed about it. I knew what I was going to look like, what emotionally the look on my face would be as I walked in to sign my name as a candidate. That I knew that the security guard would look at me and know that that person felt confident and ready to play well today.
Awesome.
All the way to that level of detail. And so I just felt like I was just walking through the paces and doing what it was that I had rehearsed in my head all those times. And it was undeniably helpful.
Wow, that's great. We were once Marty Hackelman subbed with Boston Brass once at the Chicago Brass Festival, and we were doing a master class, and someone in the audience asked him about something about like looking ahead in the music, and about whether he did that to stay ready, and Marty, who always answers things in a colorful manner, this was this wasn't even that old of a kid. Marty said, yeah, some people say that you should look ahead in the music, and he said, bullshit. He said no one in history has ever. I think he'd said something in like Alsosprach or something like that. Like no one has ever in history looked. Been thinking when they're on the first page of Alsosprach has looked ahead to rehearsal T and said, I can't wait to nail that. It's like that they look ahead to that and say, holy crap, that didn't go that. I mean, it went okay last night, but it didn't feel good. And, and he's like, just stay in the moment, stay in the moment, stay in the moment. So, yeah, there seems to be a common theme from my favorite horn players about staying in the moment. So, all right, two things quickly, and then we got to get you out of here. One is that you posted an absolutely adorable video with your son Gavin. I think were you preparing the long call? Do
Yes.
I remember this correctly?
Yes,
and
that's
is that
correct.
on Facebook?
It is on Facebook, yes.
All right, and tell us about that video, because it was precious.
Yeah, I was actually wondering at some point, is there a way to link that video to this conversation, since we've spoken so much about the ring?
Send us the link. We can we'll put it in the show notes.
Yes.
Okay, so I was just practicing. I was trying to get some work done, and Gavin was just being so cute. And he had found, Arnold Jacobs used them famously. These Voldine breathing apparatus to help you, like it's like a 5-liter thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to breathe slowly to get your lung capacity up. And it has this blue tube with a mouthpiece. Well, Gavin had taken off that mouthpiece, and he was mimicking horn sounds, and he was kind of marching around the room and going humming into. But I noticed at some point he was going up and down, following what I was doing as I was practicing, and I was like, oh man, that's so cute. And he's standing right next to me. Now, this was not planned in any way at all, because actually I still had bedhead. I was in my pajamas. No, I mean, this video has been seen by over 1 million people, I think, the last time I checked it. Like, it just went weirdly viral, and I just, nothing was planned. So I'm sitting there, I turn it on, and I asked him, I said, Gavin, you want to do a Siegfried call? And he goes, yep. And and so I start counting down, and as soon as I start playing the horn, he picks up this tube and angles it so the bell goes above his head and points out, which I don't even know how he knew to do that. And he starts singing along with me, and it was a very precious moment. I'll always remember it, and I'm actually just really happy that it ended up on video. I sent it to my colleague just to say, oh, look at this is what's going on in my house right now. And he's like, actually, that's pretty cool. You should send that to our PR department. And I was like, nah, I don't know about that. And then it ended up, going everywhere, being shared everywhere. So I'm glad people enjoyed it anyway, but I don't think it had anything about the dude with the horn playing. It's all about the cute 2-year-old boy.
Well, but that's what's so surreal, though, is that the horn playing is so phenomenal, but you don't notice it at first because you're paying attention to the adorable 2-year-old and like the father-son dynamic, but then you're like, wait a minute, that horn playing is like ridiculously good, and then you go back to the kid, and there's some layers to that video. So. Yeah, good stuff. The other thing before we let you go is that, as I'm sure you've heard about our dear friend Jens Lindemann and some of the chop problems that he's been infamously dealing with for some time now, Lance. Huh? I guess
a little bit, yeah.
It's because it's been a few years. You're just so you're so conscious of just the artistic process and about being present and you're going swimming before rehearsal. You seem like a wise man. So I'm wondering if you have any actionable advice that you could give to Lance. What? To Jens in his time of need.
Yeah, first of all, Jens, I'm so sorry to hear about these troubles. A lot of people go through this. Maybe I can just offer some advice. And actually, I heard this advice come down from a pretty famous trumpet player, Bud someone. Herseth, yes. I think that you could explore different topical ointment or cream for your chops that might help out here. You already know where I'm going with this, Lance. And anyway, so I've really heard that to repair the tissue inside maybe some swollen tissue you might find in the chops. You might check the Preparation H.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good idea.
Inside the.
Oh, just right on top. Just put it right on top there. Yeah.
When in doubt, ointment.
It's just go ahead and put that tube right on your music stand so everyone knows that's your
that's right.
Your approach too. And yeah.
He's got mouth hemorrhoids. I don't think we're going to end on a better note than that. There you go, man.
I think so.
We've got a lot of these. That's one of the best ones. There you have it. So, I don't remember who told him to punch himself in the face. That might have been my favorite one of all. But anyway, I don't remember. Well, someone will email us. So, well, Jeff, this has been awesome. This has been great. It was cool to take such a deep dive into the ring stuff because just the preparation, the physical side, putting us I feel like I was at that rehearsal with you. You described it in such detail. And kind of what goes on with operas, and there's just so many layers to those to that art form, and so it was really great to get such an insight into it. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, it's great to be a part of this conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and we're gonna hang out with you for just a few more minutes for our Patreon only bonus episode. But other than that, Lance, unless I'm forgetting anything, I think that's gonna do it.
No, you are not.
Yeah. And that is going to do it for another episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to hear the bonus episode featuring today's guest, please visit patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn how you can support the show and instantly access all bonus materials, as well as gain access to a special patron-only Facebook group. The Brass Junkies is produced by the amazing, wonderful, and truly inspirational Will Houchin. The theme music was composed by Fernando Dados and performed by Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. We are at Pray for Jens on Twitter and Instagram and have a Facebook page at facebook.com/prayforjens. You can find out more about the Brass Junkies and all the other Pedal Note Media podcasts at pedalnotemedia.com. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.